The restaurant manager threw her onto the table in front of everyone. The moment her skin touched the surface, a glowing mark appeared on her wrist. What she didn't know, miles away, the vampire king woke from 3 centuries of sleep, and he was coming for her. The glass shattered before Arya even realized it had slipped from her fingers. "Are you kidding me right now?" Dalton's voice cut through the kitchen noise like a blade. "That's the 3rd mistake tonight." Arya's hands trembled as she bent to pick up the pieces. "I'm sorry, You'll what? Pay for it." He stepped closer, his breath reeking of coffee and anger. "You can't even afford decent shoes." It was true. The soles of her sneakers were so thin she could feel every crack in the tile floor. But she'd gotten this job after 12 rejections and she needed it. Her landlord had already threatened eviction twice this month. "I'll be more careful," she whispered, not meeting his eyes. The other servers had gone quiet. Maria, who trained her that afternoon, pretended to organize menus. The cook turned his back to the grill. Everyone knew Dalton's moods. Everyone knew to stay invisible when he was like this. More careful. Dalton laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. "You've been here 6 hours and you've already cost me money, slowed down service, and made my restaurant look like a joke. Please, I need this job." Should have thought of that before you decided to be useless. The words stung more than they should have. Arya had been up since 5 that morning, had walked 40 minutes to get here because the bus fare would have eaten into her grocery money, had smiled through every rude customer and complicated order. Her feet ached. Her head pounded. And now this man, this angry, red-faced man, was looking at her like she was trash. "I'm sorry," she said again, hating how small her voice sounded. "Sorry doesn't fix broken plates." Dalton moved closer, and Arya instinctively stepped back. Her hip hit the counter. "You know what? I'm done. I should have trusted my gut when I saw you walk in here looking like—" "Dalton, come on, man, that was Marcus," the line cook, finally speaking up. "It's just a glass. Stay out of this." Dalton's hand shot out, and suddenly he was gripping Arya's arm. Hard. "I'm teaching her a lesson about consequences." Everything happened too fast. One moment Arya was trying to pull away, her heart hammering against her ribs. The next, Dalton had grabbed her other arm and was dragging her toward the nearest table, a foretop by the window where a family had been sitting just minutes before. "Stop, what are you?" Arya's words dissolved into a gasp as he shoved her backward. Her body hit the table surface with a thud that knocked the wind from her lungs. Plates clattered. A fork fell to the floor. Somewhere, Maria screamed. But Arya barely heard it. Because the moment her skin made contact with the table, pain exploded across her left wrist. It felt like someone had pressed a white-hot brand against her flesh. She cried out, clutching her arm to her chest, and that's when she saw it. A symbol. Glowing. Pulsing beneath her skin like it had always been there, just waiting. It looked like a crown made of thorns, intertwined with strange letters she didn't recognize. The light was silvery blue, bright enough to cast shadows on the walls. Bright enough to make Dalton stumble backward, his face draining of color. "What the hell?" He pointed at her with a shaking finger. "What is that?" Arya couldn't answer. She was frozen, staring at her own wrist as the symbol grew brighter. She felt something else too, a pull, deep in her chest, like an invisible thread had just been yanked tight. Like something far away had suddenly woken up. "She's a freak." Dalton's voice pitched higher. "Did you see that? Did everyone see that?" Maria was crying. Marcus had his phone out, probably calling 911. The few remaining customers were filming, their phones pointed at Arya like weapons. The glow began to fade, but the symbol remained, now a faint silvery mark on her skin. Arya's wrist throbbed in time with her heartbeat. "Get out!" Dalton was backing toward the kitchen, his eyes wide with genuine fear. "Get out of my restaurant before I call the cops." Arya didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled off the table, grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door and ran. Outside, the autumn air bit at her face. She didn't stop running until she reached the park 3 blocks away, where she collapsed on a bench and finally looked at her wrist again. The symbol was still there. Fainter now, but visible.
Real.
She touched it with trembling fingers. It was warm. "What's happening to me?" she whispered to the empty park. Above her, the moon hung fat and silver in the sky. And somewhere, miles away, beneath layers of stone and earth and forgotten time, something ancient stirred in the darkness. A coffin made of black stone cracked down the middle. Dust fell from the ceiling of a crypt that hadn't been opened in 300 years. And in that tomb beneath an abandoned cathedral on the edge of the city, Draven opened his eyes. They glowed the same silvery blue as the mark on Arya's wrist. "The air," he breathed, his voice rough from centuries of sleep. "She lives." His hand closed around the edge of his coffin, and the stone crumbled like sand beneath his fingers. Power, ancient, terrible, magnificent, flooded through his veins. The bloodline had awakened, and everything was about to change. The cathedral had been abandoned for 60 years. The city had built a highway around it, left it to rot behind chain-link fences and warnings about structural instability. Teenagers sometimes broke in on dares. Homeless people avoided it, claiming the air inside felt wrong. They were right to stay away. Draven pushed the stone lid of his coffin aside like it weighed nothing. It crashed to the floor, splitting into 3 pieces. He stood slowly, his body remembering what it meant to move, to breathe, to exist in the waking world. The crypt was exactly as he'd left it, dust-covered, silent. His lieutenant Varos had sealed him here after the queen's death, after the bloodline disappeared into myth. "Sleep until she returns," Varos had said. "Sleep until the magic calls you home." 300 years. 300 years of nothing. And now this. Draven pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the pull. It was stronger than he'd expected, sharp as a fishhook lodged beneath his ribs. The air wasn't just alive. She was awake, activated. And she was close. He climbed the stone steps leading up from the crypt, his movements growing steadier with each stride. The cathedral's main chamber was a ruin, pews rotted to skeletons, stained glass windows shattered, moonlight spilling through holes in the roof. Beautiful in its way. Draven closed his eyes and followed the invisible thread connecting him to the mark. North. Maybe 5 miles. In the city proper, surrounded by steel and glass and human noise. She would be terrified, confused, vulnerable. And every vampire who'd been searching for the lost bloodline would feel that surge of power, just as he had. He had to reach her first. Draven moved to the cathedral's entrance. The chains that had sealed the doors snapped like thread when he touched them. Outside, the world had changed. Cars instead of carriages, electric lights instead of gas lamps, towers of metal and glass reaching toward the sky. He'd watched it happen through Varos's reports, delivered once per decade to his sleeping mind. But seeing it, standing in it, was different. A car hunked somewhere. Music thumped from a building nearby. The air smelled like exhaust and food, and a million human lives packed together. Draven smiled. Then he began to run. Across the city, Dalton was packing. His hands shook so badly he could barely zip his duffel bag. Clothes, documents, cash from the safe. He grabbed everything within reach and threw it in. "I'm not crazy," he muttered. "I saw it." Everyone saw it. His phone buzzed. Another message. He'd been ignoring them for the past hour. Staff asking what happened, his boss demanding an explanation, even a reporter who'd somehow gotten his number. He didn't care. He just needed to leave. That glow. That impossible, unnatural glow. And the girl's eyes when it happened, like she'd been somewhere else entirely, looking at something he couldn't see. Something had noticed her. He was sure of it. The temperature in the restaurant had dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The lights had flickered. And for just a moment, Dalton had felt like prey. Like something vast and hungry had turned its attention toward their little corner of the world. Not my problem, he said, throwing the bag over his shoulder. Not anymore. He had a cousin in Nevada. He'd drive through the night, get there by morning, figure out the rest later. Dalton took one last look at his apartment, the place he'd lived for 8 years, and walked out without locking the door. He didn't notice the figure watching from the rooftop across the street. Didn't see the red eyes tracking his movement as he got into his car and peeled out of the parking lot like something was chasing him. The figure smiled, revealing fangs. Running won't help, she whispered, but it's fun to watch them try. Arya made it back to her apartment building just before midnight. Her wrist had stopped glowing, but the mark remained, a silver tattoo that definitely hadn't been there this morning. She locked her door, shoved a chair under the handle for good measure, and sat on her bed with her knees pulled to her chest. Her phone was blowing up. Texts from Maria. 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. And when she finally opened social media, her stomach dropped. The video was everywhere. Someone had caught the whole thing. Dalton throwing her onto the table, the light exploding from her wrist, her face twisted in pain and confusion. The caption read, "Fake or real? Restaurant worker has supernatural breakdown." 20,000 views already. Comments arguing about CGI, special effects, publicity stunts. But Arya knew the truth. It was real. All of it. She touched the mark again, traced the pattern of the crown and the strange letters. It was warm, like it had a heartbeat of its own. "What are you?" she whispered. Outside her window, the city glittered with light. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that something impossible had just happened. Completely unaware that in the darkness between buildings, something ancient was getting closer. Draven was 3 miles away now, and he was smiling. By morning, the video had 2 million views. Arya sat at her kitchen table, watching her life fall apart in real time. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt that pull again, like something was searching for her. The comment section was a war zone. Obviously fake. You can see the CGI glitch at 0.15 inch. My cousin works in VFX, and he says this is real. The light moves wrong for CGI. That manager should be arrested for assault. Who cares about the glowing thing? Anyone else notice her eyes changed color for a second? Arya's phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different number. Then again. She turned it off and pressed her palms against her eyes. The mark on her wrist pulsed warmly, as if reminding her it was still there. Still real. A knock at her door made her jump.
Arya.
It was Mrs. Chun from across the hall. Are you okay? There are people outside. Arya moved to her window and looked down. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the street. Below, a small crowd had gathered. People with cameras. Someone had a microphone. How did they find me? She breathed. Her address wasn't in the video. She wasn't tagged. She'd deleted all her social media accounts 2 hours ago, but... Another knock. Harder this time.
Miss Arya.
A man's voice. Not Mrs. Chun. My name is David Park. I'm with Channel 7 News. I'd love to talk to you about what happened at the restaurant. Arya backed away from the door. Her heart was hammering again, just like last night. We're prepared to offer compensation for an exclusive interview, the reporter continued. We can discuss terms. Go away. Arya's voice cracked. I don't want to talk to anyone. Silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hall. But Arya knew he'd be back. They'd all be back. She looked at her wrist again. The mark seemed brighter in the morning light, almost luminescent. The crown and thorns pattern had small details she hadn't noticed before, tiny symbols within symbols, spiraling inward toward a center point. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And somewhere, in places Arya couldn't even imagine, others were taking notice. In a penthouse suite overlooking the harbor, Lady Kasha replayed the video for the 5th time. She was old, Not as old as Draven, but old enough to remember when the queen's bloodline vanished. Old enough to have searched for it herself decades ago, before giving up and focusing on consolidating her own power. "Are we certain?" she asked without looking away from the screen. Her advisor, a thin vampire named Emil, nodded. "The sigil is authentic. We had 3 scholars verify it independently. That's the royal mark. No question." After 300 years, Kasha's red nails tapped against her wine glass. The liquid inside wasn't wine. Fascinating. And she's human raised. Appears to be. No knowledge of her heritage, based on her reaction. Then she's vulnerable, Kasha smiled. Where is she now? We're tracking that. The video was geotagged to the east side. We have people canvassing the area. Find her before Draven does. Kasha finally looked at Emil. If the Vampire King wakes, and I'm certain he already has, he'll try to control her. Mold her into whatever he needs her to be. And if we find her first, Kasha's smile widened. Then we present her with a choice. Join us willingly or... She didn't need to finish the sentence. Emil bowed and left to make arrangements. Alone, Kasha returned to the video. She paused it at the moment the mark appeared, zooming in on the girl's face. Young.
Pretty.
Terrified. Poor thing, Kasha murmured. You have no idea what you are, what you're worth. The girl's blood could legitimize any claim to the throne, could unite the fractured vampire clans, or tear them apart completely. Kasha had spent 2 centuries building her power base, making alliances, eliminating rivals. She wouldn't let some human-raised child ruin that. One way or another, this Arya would serve a purpose. Arya lasted until noon before the panic attack hit. It started with her hands tingling, then her chest tightening. The walls of her tiny apartment seemed to press inward, and the mark on her wrist burned hot enough to make her gasp. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and tried to remember the breathing exercises her mother had taught her years ago. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. But it wasn't working. Because as she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw something that made her blood freeze. Her eyes. They were glowing. Just faintly, just for a moment, the same silvery blue as the mark. Then it faded, and she was herself again. Except she wasn't. Not anymore. Something's coming, she whispered to her reflection. I can feel it. And she was right. Draven was less than a mile away now. And he wasn't the only one closing in. Arya didn't leave her apartment all day. She kept the curtains drawn, the door locked, the chair wedged firmly under the handle. The reporters eventually dispersed around 3, but she could still feel eyes on her. Watching. Waiting. By nightfall, she'd convinced herself she was losing her mind. It's stress, she muttered, pacing the narrow space between her bed and kitchenette. Exhaustion. Maybe I hit my head when he pushed me. Maybe none of this is real. But the mark on her wrist said otherwise. At 11:30, the sound started. Scratching. Like nails on stone. Coming from outside her window.
Aria froze.
She was on the 3rd floor. There was nothing outside that window except a 3-story drop and a dumpster. The scratching came again. Deliberate. Patient. Her breath caught. She grabbed the only weapon she could find, a kitchen knife, dull from years of use, and approached the window. The curtain fluttered, though she'd closed the window hours ago. No, she breathed.
It was open now.
Just a crack. And perched on the fire escape outside was something that made her knife hand shake. A woman, pale as moonlight, dressed in black, with eyes that reflected the streetlights like a cat's. She smiled, showing teeth that were far too sharp. Hello, little heiress, the woman purred. Why don't you invite me in so we can talk? Arya slammed the window shut and locked it. The woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That won't help. We know where you are now. We can smell the royal blood from here. It's intoxicating. Leave me alone. Arya backed away from the window. I'm afraid that's not possible anymore. You're far too valuable. Lady Kasia sends her regards. The woman's head snapped to the side, as if hearing something Arya couldn't. Her smile vanished. No, she hissed. He can't be. A sound like thunder cracked through the night. The woman on the fire escape screamed and launched herself backward into the darkness. Arya heard her body hit something, heard a man's voice, low, commanding, furious, and then silence. Arya's entire body was shaking. She pressed herself against the far wall, knife raised, waiting. Nothing happened for 3 heartbeats.
4. 5.
Then a voice spoke from just outside her door.
Calm. Deep.
Ancient.
Arya.
That is your name, isn't it? She didn't answer. I'm not here to hurt you, but we need to leave.
Now.
More will come, and I can't fight them all while protecting you. How do you know my name? Her voice was barely a whisper. The same way I know you're terrified. The same way I've known you existed since the moment your mark awakened a pause.
Please.
Open the door. Are you insane? I don't know you.
No.
But I know you. I've been waiting for you for 300 years. Arya's hand went to her wrist, to the mark that pulsed warmly beneath her touch. What are you talking about? Open the door, and I'll explain everything. Or stay inside and die when the Crimson Court returns with reinforcements. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice. Arya moved the chair, unlocked the deadbolt, and cracked the door open. The man standing in her hallway didn't look like a monster. He was tall, dark-haired, with sharp features and eyes that held the weight of centuries. He wore modern clothes, dark jeans, a black coat, but something about him felt displaced in time. When their eyes met, Arya felt that pull again.
Stronger this time.
Like recognizing someone she'd known in a dream. You, she breathed. I felt you. When the mark appeared, you were far away, and then. I woke up, Draven smiled slightly. Yes. Then, to Arya's complete shock, he knelt. Right there in her dingy apartment hallway, this man, this creature, who radiated power like heat from a furnace, dropped to one knee and bowed his head. My queen's blood, he said quietly. I am Draven. I was the sworn protector of Queen Seraphina, and I have waited 3 centuries for her bloodline to awaken. I am yours to command. Arya's knife clattered to the floor. I'm not. Words failed her. What are you talking about? I'm a waitress.
I'm nobody.
You're the last descendant of the vampire queen. Draven raised his eyes to meet hers. They glowed faintly in the dim hallway light. The mark proves it. Your blood carries the power to unite or destroy my entire race.
Vampire, Arya repeated numbly.
Yes, that woman on the fire escape was a scout for Lady Kasia. One of many who will come for you now that you've been revealed. Draven stood in one fluid motion. We need to leave. I have a safe place prepared. I'm not going anywhere with you. Then you'll die here. His voice was gentle but firm. They will come in numbers I cannot fight alone. They will take you, and they will use your blood to wage war. Arya's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. Vampires weren't real. Magic wasn't real. But the mark on her wrist was warm and getting warmer. And somewhere in the distance, she heard sirens. No, not sirens. Screaming. Draven's expression darkened. They're already here. We're out of time. He extended his hand. Trust me. Please. Arya looked at his hand. At the mark on her wrist. At the strange man who'd just called her queen. She took his hand. And her world changed forever. Draven moved like liquid shadow. One moment they were in Arya's apartment hallway, and the next he'd swept her into his arms and was running, not down the stairs, but up, toward the roof access. Wait, my stuff, Arya started. Is replaceable. You're not. He kicked open the roof door with enough force to tear it off its hinges. Cold night air hit Arya's face as they emerged onto the rooftop. Below, she could hear crashes and screams from inside the building. Mrs. Chun, Arya gasped. The other tenants are not the target. Draven set her down and moved to the roof's edge, scanning the street below. Cash's people want you alive. Everyone else is just in the way. Arya's stomach turned. This was her fault. People were in danger because of what she was, whatever that meant. How are we getting down? She asked. Draven turned back to her with an expression that might have been apologetic. You're not going to like it. Before Arya could ask what he meant, he'd scooped her up again. And then he jumped. Arya's scream died in her throat as they fell through the darkness. 3 stories should have killed them both. Instead, Draven landed in a crouch on the pavement, absorbing the impact like it was nothing.
Impossible. Arya breathed.
Welcome to your new reality. He set her down and grabbed her hand.
Run.
Stay close. They ran. Through alleys and side streets, past closed shops and sleeping houses. Arya's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but every time she slowed, the mark on her wrist would pulse warmly, and somehow she'd find the strength to keep going. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, Draven pulled her into an abandoned building. It looked like an old watchtower, stone walls, narrow windows, a single wooden door hanging crooked on its hinges. This won't hold them long, Draven said, but we need to talk. You need to understand what's happening. Arya collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath.
People
are dead. Because of me. No one died. I told you they want you alive. He moved to a window and looked out. Though that may change if you fall into the wrong hands. I don't understand any of this. Arya pressed her hands to her face. Yesterday, I was serving pasta. Now I'm running from vampires and apparently I'm royalty? None of this makes sense. Draven was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. 300 years ago, there was a queen, Seraphina. She ruled the vampire clans with wisdom and power that hadn't been seen in millennia. Under her reign, there was peace, order. Arya lowered her hands. What happened to her? Betrayal. A faction believed vampires shouldn't have to hide from humans. They wanted war, domination. Seraphina refused. Draven's jaw tightened. They poisoned her. Silver in her wine. By the time we discovered it, the damage was irreversible. She died.
Yes.
But before she did, she told me a secret. She'd sent away her daughter, half vampire, half human, hidden her among mortals where no one would think to look. The girl's vampire blood was diluted enough that she could pass as human, live a normal life. Arya's heart was pounding again. My mother's side of the family. I never knew much about them. She always said they were private, estranged. Because they were protecting you. The bloodline had to disappear completely. If the traitors had found even a hint of Seraphina's descendant, they would have killed every person in your family line. Then why reveal it now? Why did this mark appear? Draven turned from the window. The sigil is a protection mechanism. It only activates when you're in mortal danger. When that manager attacked you, the mark thought I might die and woke me to protect you. That was its purpose. I was put into stasis until the day you needed me. He crossed the room and knelt before her again, his expression intense. You are the last of the royal blood. Your existence changes everything. Arya looked at the mark on her wrist. In the darkness of the watchtower, it glowed faintly. You keep saying my blood is important.
Why?
Because vampire succession isn't about power or politics. It's about blood. Literal blood. Draven's voice was grave. Only someone carrying Seraphina's bloodline can legitimize the next ruler. Every vampire lord who wants to claim the throne needs you to acknowledge them. Your blood, willingly given, would make them unstoppable. And if I refuse, then they take it by force, or kill you to prevent anyone else from having it. He met her eyes. The clans have been fractured for 3 centuries.
Weak.
Fighting among themselves. You're the key to ending that chaos, or making it infinitely worse. Arya's hands were shaking again. I don't want this. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. Seraphina didn't want this for you either. She hoped your line would stay hidden forever. Live normal human lives, Draven stood. But the moment that mark appeared, the moment it was caught on camera, there's no going back. What do? You survive. You learn. And you decide what kind of queen you want to be. I'm not a queen. You are. Whether you accept it or not. Outside, something howled. Not a dog. Not anything natural. Draven's expression darkened.
They've found us again.
We need to move. Where? Somewhere they won't think to look. Somewhere far from here, he offered his hand again. Trust me a little longer? Arya looked at his hand. At the mark. At the impossible situation she'd been thrust into. She took his hand. Don't make me regret this. Draven smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. I'll do my best. They didn't make it 10 steps from the watchtower before the world exploded. A figure dropped from above, slamming into the ground between them with enough force to crack the pavement. Arya stumbled backward as Draven shoved her behind him. The vampire that rose from the crouch was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders like a linebacker and eyes that burned crimson. The king himself, the vampire said, his voice a rumble. Lady Kasha will be pleased. Victor, Draven's tone was ice. Still taking orders from that power-hungry snake, I see. She pays well, Victor cracked his knuckles. And she's promised me a position in the new court once we deliver the girl. You mean once you kill me and take her?
Victor grinned, femmes gleaming.
Nothing personal. Just business. He moved. Arya didn't even see it happen. One moment Victor was 10 feet away, the next he was colliding with Draven in a blur of motion that sent both of them crashing through the watchtower's wall. The building shuddered. Dust rained down. Draven.
Arya screamed.
More figures emerged from the shadows. 3 vampires, 2 women and a man, all dressed in dark clothing, all with eyes that reflected the moonlight. The heiress, one of the women, purred. Even prettier in person. Arya backed away, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. A piece of broken brick. A metal pipe. Anything. Stay calm, little queen, the male vampire said, advancing slowly. We're not going to hurt you. Lady Kasha wants you intact. Come near me and I'll scream. Who's going to hear you? This warehouse district has been abandoned for years. He lunged. Arya threw up her hands instinctively, and something inside her ignited. The mark on her wrist erupted with light, not the soft glow from before, but a blinding flash that lit up the entire street like a lightning strike. The vampire screamed and flew backward, his body hitting a wall 20 feet away. Arya stared at her hands. They were glowing. Both of them, not just the marked wrist. Silver blue energy crackled between her fingers like electricity. Impossible, one of the women breathed. She hasn't been trained. She shouldn't be able to. The second woman cut her off. Get her. Before she. Another pulse of light burst from Arya, wider this time. It rippled outward in a wave that sent both female vampires sprawling. They hissed and scrambled backward, smoke rising from where the light had touched them. Inside the watchtower, Draven and Victor were locked in brutal combat. Draven was fast, impossibly fast, but Victor was stronger. And Draven was weakened from 3 centuries of sleep. Victor's fist connected with Draven's jaw, sending him crashing through another wall. The vampire king hit the ground hard, blood, dark and thick, dripping from his mouth. You're weak, old king, Victor taunted, advancing. Should have stayed in your coffin. Draven tried to rise, stumbled. His healing was slower than it should be. He needed time. Time he didn't have. Victor raised his fist for a killing blow. And froze. Arya stood in the broken doorway, her entire body surrounded by that silvery light. Her eyes blazed with it. When she spoke, her voice carried an echo, as if someone else was speaking through her. Touch him again, and I will erase you from existence. The words didn't sound like hers. They were older.
Deeper.
Carrying a weight that made even Victor hesitate. You don't know what you're doing, Girl, he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. You can't control that power. Want to test that theory? Arya raised her hand, and the mark on her wrist burned so bright it hurt to look at. Energy gathered around her palm, coalescing into something solid. Something deadly. Victor's eyes widened. That's the Queen's judgment. You can't. She released it. The blast caught Victor square in the chest and sent him flying backward through the street, through a chain-link fence, through the wall of the building beyond. When the light faded, there was a Victor-shaped hole in 3 separate structures. Arya swayed, the glow fading from her body. Her legs gave out. Draven caught her before she hit the ground. Easy, he murmured. You just channeled 3 centuries of dormant power. Your body isn't used to. Is he dead? Arya's voice was her own again.
Small.
Scared. Draven looked at the destruction she'd caused.
No.
But he'll think twice before attacking again. The other 3 vampires had fled.
Smart of them. Draven lifted Arya carefully.
She was barely conscious, her head lolling against a shoulder.
What?
Was that? She whispered. Your heritage. Seraphina's power, sleeping in your blood. He started walking, moving quickly but smoothly, so as not to jostle her. You awakened it faster than I thought possible. Much faster. Felt like someone else was there. Perhaps she was. Draven's expression was thoughtful. The queens protect their bloodline, even in death. Seraphina may have left more than just her power behind. Arya tried to respond, but darkness was pulling at her. The exhaustion was overwhelming. She'd used muscle she didn't know she had, burned energy she didn't know existed. Sleep, Draven said softly. I'll keep you safe. Promise. On my life. What's left of it? The last thing Arya saw before consciousness slipped away was the night sky above them, stars scattered like diamonds against black velvet. And somewhere in that darkness, watching from a penthouse window miles away, Lady Kasha threw her wine glass against the wall. Victor failed, Emil reported quietly. Obviously, Kasha's voice was cold fury. She can channel already. Without training. Without preparation. What do we do? Kasha smiled, though there was no warmth in it. We change tactics. If we can't take her by force, we'll win her trust. Find out everything about her human life, her friends, her fears, her weaknesses. And Draven is the problem. The girl trusts him, believes him. Kasha turned from the window. We need to break that bond. Make her doubt him. Make her see him as the monster he is. How? Everyone has secrets, Emil. Even ancient kings. Her smile widened. Find his. And make sure the girl learns them. Arya woke to the sound of waves. For a moment, she forgot everything. The restaurant, the mark, the vampires. She was just a girl waking up in an unfamiliar bed, confused about where she was. Then she saw her wrist. The mark was still there, faint but visible, like a tattoo drawn in silver ink. And it all came rushing back. She sat up slowly. The room was small but clean, weathered wooden walls, a single window showing endless gray ocean, fog so thick she could barely see 20 feet. The air smelled like salt and old wood. You're awake. Draven stood in the doorway, holding a cup of something steaming. He looked different in the daylight, less imposing, more tired. There were shadows under his eyes she hadn't noticed before. Where are we? Arya's voice was hoarse. Coastal town. 4 hours north of the city. No one knows about this place. I've owned it since before cars existed. He offered her the cup. Dea, you need to replenish your energy. Arya took it, grateful for the warmth. How long was I out? 16 hours. Your body needed to recover from channeling that much power. Draven sat in a chair across from the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck. She sipped the tea. It was bitter but grounding. Did I really throw a fully grown vampire through 3 buildings? Yes, a hint of a smile. You have impressive instincts for someone who learned about their heritage 12 hours ago. Arya looked at her hands. Normal hands. A waitress's hands, calloused from carrying trays, nails short and practical. Hard to believe they'd created that explosion of light. What happens now? She asked quietly. We keep moving. Kasha knows about this town, but it'll take her people time to mobilize. We have maybe 2 days before we need to leave again. Draven leaned forward. I need to teach you control. What you did last night was pure instinct, powerful but dangerous. To yourself as much as your enemies. Teach me how. The old way. The way Seraphina taught her court. He stood. Finish your tea. Then we begin. The next 2 days were the strangest of Arya's life. Draven taught her about her bloodline in that fog-shrouded cottage. About Seraphina, who'd been born in an age when vampires and humans had lived in careful balance. About the Great Fracture, when radicals on both sides had pushed for war. About how Seraphina had tried to hold the peace together with wisdom, diplomacy, and, when necessary, overwhelming force. She could make vampires kneel with just a look, Draven said as they walked the beach at dusk, the fog swirling around their feet. Not through fear, but through recognition. They knew she was something greater, something worth following. And you? Arya asked. Why did you follow her? Draven was quiet for a long moment. Because she saw me. Not the weapon I'd been trained to be. Not the monster I could become. She saw the person underneath and believed I could be better. There was pain in his voice. Old pain. Carefully buried. You loved her, Arya said softly. Everyone loved her. That was her gift. He picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. And her curse. When she died, the love died with her. What remained was hunger for power. On the second night, Draven moved Arya again. Already, she protested as they packed the few belongings he'd brought. Kasha's scouts were spotted in the next town over. We can't risk it. They drove through the night. Draven had a car hidden in a garage that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. As they left the coast behind, Arya watched the fog disappear in the rearview mirror. Where to now? The Opera House. Downtown. Sometimes the best hiding place is in plain sight. The Opera House was magnificent, all marble columns and gold trim, with a grand staircase that swept upward like something from a fairy tale. But Draven led her past the main entrance, through a service door, down a narrow staircase that seemed to descend forever. There's a library beneath the Opera House? Arya whispered, stunned by the vast room before her. Has been for 200 years. Only a few know about it. Draven lit candles, and the flames revealed thousands of books lining the walls. Everything ever written about vampire history, including the truth about your family. Arya spent 3 days in that underground library. She read about Seraphina in a dozen different accounts. Some painted her as a saint, others as a tyrant, but all agreed on one thing: she'd been powerful beyond measure. Is this what I'm supposed to become? Arya asked, holding up a book with an illustration of Seraphina, beautiful, terrible, crowned in silver thorns. You're supposed to become yourself, Draven said. Seraphina's power is yours by blood. But her choices don't have to be. On the 4th night in the library, Arya woke from a nightmare, or was it a memory? Gasping. She'd seen a woman with her face standing in a throne room, surrounded by kneeling vampires. But the woman's eyes were empty, controlled. And standing behind her, hand on her shoulder like a chain, was someone Arya couldn't quite see. Just a dream, she whispered. But it didn't feel like one. The next morning, Draven announced they were moving again.
The forest, he said.
There's a cabin. Remote. We can stay longer there. You need more training before. Before what? His expression was grim. Before they stop trying to capture you and start trying to kill you instead. The cabin was everything he'd promised, isolated, surrounded by towering pines, with no road leading in or out. It should have felt safe. But that night, As Arya lay in bed listening to the wind howl through the trees, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That somewhere in the darkness, a betrayal was taking shape. The woman in the mirror had Arya's face but different eyes. Older eyes.
Sadder.
Carrying the weight of centuries Arya hadn't lived. "You're finally listening," the woman said. Arya tried to speak and realized she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. She was frozen in place, watching this impossible reflection smile at her. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to warn you." The mirror rippled like water, and suddenly Arya was somewhere else. A throne room carved from black stone, lit by torches that burned silver instead of gold. Vampires filled the space, hundreds of them, all kneeling before a woman in a crown of thorns. Seraphina. She looked exactly like the paintings, except more real, more alive. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and her eyes, God, her eyes were the same silver blue as the mark on Arya's wrist. "They come for you with pretty words," Seraphina spoke, though her lips didn't move. Her voice echoed in Arya's mind. "They'll tell you they want peace, unity, that they only wish to serve." The scene shifted. Now Seraphina was older, thinner, lying in a bed that looked more like a tomb. Her skin had a grayish tint, and her breathing was labored. "They'll lie," she continued, "as they lied to me, as they poisoned my wine and smiled while I died." Arya wanted to scream, to look away, but she was trapped in the vision. "Your blood is the key, but a key can open doors or lock them. Can free prisoners or create them." Seraphina's eyes, fading now, the light dimming, fixed on something beyond Arya's sight. "You must choose wisely who you trust. Not all who kneel mean to serve. Some kneel to get close enough to strike." The scene shifted again. Arya stood in a forest, this forest she realized, the one surrounding the cabin. But it was daytime, and Draven was there. He was talking to someone Arya couldn't see, his expression fierce. "I serve the bloodline," Draven said. "Not you. Not anyone else." A man's voice responded, cold and calculating. "The bloodline serves those strong enough to control it. You know this. You've always known this. I won't let you use her. You won't have a choice." The vision fractured like broken glass. Arya gasped and jerked awake, her heart pounding. She was in the cabin, in her bed, moonlight streaming through the window. Everything was normal. Except it wasn't. Because sitting at the foot of her bed, translucent as mist, was Seraphina. "You're real," Arya breathed. "I'm a memory, an echo. What remains when power is strong enough to transcend death." Seraphina's form flickered. "I don't have much time. The mark connects us, but maintaining this connection drains you." "What did you mean about choosing wisely?" Arya sat up slowly. "Are you saying I can't trust Draven?" "I'm saying trust is earned, not given. Draven served me faithfully until the end. But I've been dead 300 years.
People change.
Especially when they've had centuries to reconsider their loyalties. He's protected me, taught me, risked his life. Because you're valuable. But valuable to whom? For what purpose?" Seraphina's image grew fainter. "Listen to me carefully. Your blood can legitimize any vampire's claim to the throne. But it can also destroy 1 inch. I don't understand. If you refuse someone claiming power, if you mark them as unworthy, your blood becomes poison to them. That's the other half of the sigil's purpose. Protection." Seraphina's eyes met Arya's. "But you must speak the words of denial willingly. Under no coercion, no compulsion. Your free will is everything." "What words?" "When the time comes, you'll know." Seraphina's form was barely visible now. 3 factions seek you. Lady Cash's Crimson Court. They want to control you, make you a puppet queen. The Old Guard wants you dead. Better no queen than one with human blood. And then there are those who claim they want to restore the true succession. Draven, perhaps. Or perhaps he serves someone else. Someone who's been waiting even longer than he has. Seraphina was almost gone. Be careful, child. The greatest betrayals come from those we've learned to trust. From those who sleep under the same roof. Wait. Don't go. I need to know more. But Serafina vanished like smoke. Arya sat in the darkness, trembling. Her wrist throbbed where the mark pulsed with residual magic. Those who sleep under the same roof. She looked toward her bedroom door. Beyond it, in the cabin's main room, Draven was keeping watch, like he had every night since they'd started running. Had he really been talking to someone in the forest? Or was that just her paranoia, fed by Serafina's warnings? Arya slipped out of bed and moved silently to the door, pressing her ear against it. Nothing. She cracked it open. The main room was empty. The front door stood ajar, cold wind whistling through. Draven was gone. Arya's heart began to race. She crept to the door and peered outside. The forest was dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. But in the distance she saw movement. 2 figures standing close together, speaking in low voices. One was Draven. The other was a vampire she didn't recognize, tall, imposing, with silver hair that seemed to glow in the darkness. "She's ready," the silver-haired vampire asked. "Almost." "Another week, perhaps 2 inch," that was Draven's voice. "Her powers are developing faster than anticipated." "Good." Lady Kasha grows impatient. The girl must choose a side before the council convenes. Arya's blood turned to ice. "She'll make the right choice," Draven said. "I'll ensure it. See that you do. You've been paid well for the service. It would be unfortunate if you failed now." The silver-haired vampire melted into shadow and disappeared. Draven stood alone in the clearing for a long moment. Then he turned back toward the cabin. Arya barely made it back to her bed before she heard the front door close. Heard his footsteps moving through the main room. Heard him pause outside her door. She kept her breathing steady, pretended to sleep. After a moment, he moved on. Arya opened her eyes in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Serafina had been right. The greatest betrayals came from those you trusted most. And Draven had been playing her from the start. Arya didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She lay perfectly still, her mind racing, replaying everything that had happened since Draven found her. Every word, every gesture, every moment she'd thought he was protecting her. Had any of it been real? "I'll ensure it." His words echoed in her head. "She'll make the right choice." The right choice for whom? For Kasha? The woman who'd sent assassins after her. As dawn light crept through the window, Arya made a decision. She would play along, pretend she knew nothing, and the moment she had a chance, she would run. Draven knocked on her door just after sunrise.
"Arya?"
"Are you awake?" She took a breath, steadied herself.
"Yeah. Come in."
He entered with a plate of food, bread, cheese, some kind of cured meat. "You need to keep your strength up. We're training again today. More control exercises?" She kept her voice light, normal. "Something different. I want to teach you about vampire politics. The factions. Who's who." He set the plate down. "Knowledge is as important as power." "So you can tell me exactly what Kasha wants me to hear?" Arya thought. But she smiled and nodded. "Okay." They spent the morning in the cabin's main room. Draven drew a map of the vampire territories, explained the power structures. He talked about Kasha like she was an enemy. "The Crimson Court wants to expand vampire influence. They believe we should rule openly rather than hide in shadows." His finger traced territories on the map. "Kasha has spent centuries building alliances. She's dangerous because she's patient." "And what do you believe?" Arya asked carefully. "I believe vampires and humans can coexist." That was Serafina's vision. "It's what I've always fought for." He met her eyes, and God help her. He looked sincere. "It's why I'm protecting you. Why I'll keep protecting you." Arya wanted to believe him. That was the worst part. Even knowing what she'd heard, part of her still wanted to trust those ancient, weary eyes. "What happens when I'm ready?" she asked. "When I've learned everything I need to know?" "Then you make your choice." Claim your throne or walk away. Draven's expression was unreadable. Either way, I'll respect it. Liar, she thought. You'll do whatever Kasha paid you to do. I need some air, Arya said, standing abruptly. Can I walk around outside? Just for a few minutes. Draven hesitated. Stay close to the cabin. And if you feel anything at all, call for me immediately. I will. She walked out into the crisp morning air, forcing herself not to run. The forest surrounded the cabin on all sides, pine trees stretching up toward a gray sky, beautiful and isolating in equal measure. Arya walked toward the tree line, counting her steps. 50 feet. 100. When she glanced back, Draven was visible through the window, his attention on something else. She ran into the forest, dodging between trees, her breath coming in gasps. She had no plan, no destination. She just needed distance, needed time to think. She'd gotten maybe a quarter mile when she heard him.
Arya.
Draven's voice, sharp with concern. Arya, stop. She pushed herself harder. Her lungs burned. The mark on her wrist began to pulse, warm and insistent, like it was trying to tell her something. A figure stepped out from behind a tree ahead of her. The silver-haired vampire from last night. Arya skidded to a halt. Running away? The vampire smiled, revealing perfect white fangs. How disappointing. And here I thought Draven said you were nearly ready. Stay away from me, Arya said, but her voice shook. I'm not here to hurt you, child. I'm here to offer you the truth. He took a step closer. My name is Varos. I was Draven's general 300 years ago. I was there when Seraphina died. I was the one who put him in that tomb to wait for you. Arya's mind reeled. You're the one who preserved the Vampire King, so he could fulfill his purpose, yes. To find you, train you, and deliver you to the Crimson Court. Varos's smile widened. Though I see by your expression you've already discovered that last part. Behind her, she heard Draven crashing through the forest. He was paid handsomely, Varos continued. Kasha promised him a position of honor in the new regime. All he had to do was earn your trust, shape your loyalties, and present you to her when the time was right. That's a lie. Draven burst into the clearing, his face twisted with fury. Varos, you traitoress. Am I lying? Varos turned to Draven. Tell her about the gold Kasha sent. Tell her about your midnight meetings with her emissaries. Tell her the truth, old friend. Draven's jaw clenched. He looked at Arya, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. It's not what you think, he said quietly. Then what is it? Arya's voice broke. Because I heard you last night. Heard you tell him I was almost ready. That you'd ensure I made the right choice. Draven went very still. You were listening. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? The truth is complicated.
No.
Arya's hands began to glow, power surging through her unbidden. The truth is simple. You're working for Kasha. You've been lying to me from the beginning. I was working for Kasha, Draven said, his voice strained. Past tense. But things changed. When?
Arya demanded.
When did they change? Before or after you realized my power was stronger than you expected? Before or after you saw I might be useful to someone other than her? Varos laughed, cold and delighted. She's smarter than you gave her credit for. Draven ignored him, focused entirely on Arya. Listen to me, please. I did take Kasha's gold. I did agree to bring you to her. But that was before I met you. Before I saw what you could become. Saw what I could become for you, you mean? Arya's power flared brighter. Did you think I'd be grateful? That I'd follow you blindly because you saved me?
No.
I thought. Draven's expression cracked. I thought I could protect you while finding a way out of the bargain. But Varos is forcing my hand. By telling the girl the truth? Varos shook his head. You always were sentimental, Draven. It's your greatest weakness. And you were always a coward, Draven snarled. Too afraid to challenge Seraphina yourself, so you poisoned her and blamed the radicals. The forest went silent. Arya looked at Varos, whose smile had frozen on his face. "What did you say?" she whispered. "He killed her," Draven said, his voice hard. "Varos killed Seraphina. Not the traitors. Not the radicals. Him. Because he believed a human-blooded queen would weaken the vampire race. He's been hunting your family line for 3 centuries, and now he's finally found you." Varos's pleasant mask shattered. His eyes blazed red. "A necessary sacrifice," he hissed. "Seraphina was going to legitimize human-vampire unions. Dilute our pure blood until we were nothing but weak half-breeds. I saved our species. You destroyed it," Draven shot back. "Without her, the clans fell apart. We've been fighting ourselves for 300 years. Better civil war than extinction through breeding with cattle." Arya's power exploded. The blast sent both vampires flying backward. Trees cracked and toppled. The ground itself seemed to shudder. When the light faded, Arya stood alone in a circle of devastation, her entire body glowing with silver-blue fire. "Both of you," she said, her voice carrying that otherworldly echo again. "Stay away from me." And then she ran. Arya ran until her legs gave out. She collapsed in a ravine miles from the cabin, gasping, her body still crackling with residual power. The mark on her wrist burned like a brand, and when she looked at it, she saw something new. The pattern had changed, grown more complex. More thorns, more symbols spiraling inward. She was changing, becoming something she didn't understand. Both of them lied, she thought bitterly. Draven worked for Kasha. Varos killed Seraphina. Everyone wants to use me. She pulled her knees to her chest and let herself cry. Not the pretty, delicate tears from movies, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. She'd lost everything. Her normal life, her freedom, even the small comfort of thinking someone was genuinely on her side. "Seraphina," she whispered. "I don't know what to do. I'm not strong enough for this." The air shimmered, and her ancestor's ghost appeared, sitting beside her on the rocks. "You're stronger than you know," Seraphina said gently. "You sent 2 ancient vampires flying with a single thought. You've survived assassination attempts, betrayal, and a complete upheaval of everything you believed about the world. That's not weakness, child. That's extraordinary resilience. But I'm alone."
"No."
"You're free," Seraphina's expression was sad but firm. "Everyone who's approached you has wanted something. But now you know the truth. Now you can make your own choice, unburdened by false loyalty." "What choice? Run forever? Hide until someone finds me and kills me? Or stand and fight?" Seraphina pointed to the mark. "You carry my power, my authority. Every vampire alive will feel it when you invoke your birthright. They'll have no choice but to acknowledge you. I don't want to be queen. Then be a judge. Be the one who decides what happens next." Seraphina's form flickered. "The old cathedral, where Draven was entombed. Go there."
"Why?"
"It's probably crawling with vampires by now."
"Exactly."
"They're gathering, waiting to see what you'll do. Varos has been spreading word of your existence, your power. The factions are mobilizing." Seraphina met her eyes. "End this, Arya, before it becomes a war that consumes both our worlds." She vanished.
Arya sat in silence, processing.
Then she stood, her decision made. If they wanted the heiress, they'd get her. But on her terms. The cathedral looked different under siege conditions. Arya approached at dusk, and even from a distance, she could see them. Vampires. Dozens, no, hundreds, surrounding the ancient building. Some wore modern clothes. Others looked like they'd stepped out of different centuries entirely. All of them turned as she emerged from the tree line. The crowd parted. Arya walked through them, her head high, her wrist glowing faintly. She felt their eyes on her, assessing, hungry, afraid.
Good.
Let them be afraid. Draven stood at the cathedral steps. He looked haggard, like he'd been fighting. Blood stained his shirt. Arya, his voice was rough. Thank God. I thought. Don't, she held up a hand. I'm not here for you. Pain flashed across his face, but he stepped aside. The cathedral's interior was lit by hundreds of candles. They'd been placed on every surface, turning the ruin into something almost holy, almost beautiful. At the far end, near where the altar had once stood, Kasia waited. She was everything Arya had imagined, elegant, ageless, with eyes that held centuries of calculation. Varos stood to her left. To her right, a woman Arya didn't recognize, ancient-looking, with white hair and eyes like chips of ice. The heiress finally graces us with her presence, Kasia said. Her voice was honey over steel. We've been waiting. I know, Arya walked down the center aisle. I know everything. What you all want. What you've done to get it. More vampires filed in behind her, filling the cathedral. She was surrounded.
Trapped.
But she wasn't afraid anymore. You want me to choose, Arya continued, to legitimize one of your claims. Make one of you the next ruler. That is the traditional way, yes, the white-haired woman said. I am Elder Morgana, representing the old guard. Though I should tell you, our preference would be for you to simply... Arya finished. Yeah, I got that part. Morgana's smile was cold. Nothing personal, child. But human blood has no place on the vampire throne. And yet here I am. With more power in my veins than most of you will ever have. Arya's mark flared brighter. Serafina chose to hide her bloodline in humanity. That wasn't weakness. It was strategy, protection, insurance against people like you. Bold words, Kasia said. But you're one girl against hundreds. You can't fight us all. I don't need to fight you. Arya stopped in the center of the cathedral. I just need to remind you what I am. She closed her eyes and reached deep inside, to the place where Serafina's power lived. The mark on her wrist exploded with light. But this time, Arya didn't just release it. She controlled it. Silver-blue energy poured from her body, spreading across the floor like water. It climbed the walls, filled the cone, wrapped around every vampire present. They gasped, tried to move, and found themselves frozen. This is blood judgment, Arya said, her voice echoing with that dual tone. My birthright. My power. Every one of you will stand in it until I'm finished speaking. She turned slowly, meeting as many eyes as she could. I didn't ask for this. Didn't want it. But you've all made it clear I don't have a choice. So here's what's going to happen, she pointed at Kasia. You want a puppet queen you can control. Denied. The light around Kasia flared red, and she gasped in pain. Arya pointed at Morgana. You want me dead because I'm not pure enough. Also denied. The same red flare. Morgana hissed. And Varos, Arya turned to him, and her eyes blazed. You murdered my ancestor. You've spent 3 centuries trying to destroy my family. You're not just denied. You're exiled. The light around Varos turned black. He screamed as it burned into his skin, marking him. No vampire may offer you aid or shelter, Arya declared. No territory will harbor you. You are cast out from our kind. Forever. The mark on Varos's forehead glowed with the same symbol from Arya's wrist, a crown of thorns, but inverted. Broken. He collapsed, smoking. The light faded, releasing everyone else. Arya stood in the center of the cathedral, breathing hard but still standing. I'm taking the throne, she said quietly. Not because I want it, but because none of you can be trusted with it. Silence. Then, one by one, the vampires began to kneel. The kneeling vampires looked like a painting, dozens of immortal beings, some centuries old, bowing before a 23-year-old former waitress who'd learned she was royalty less than a week ago. Arya should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exhausted. Rise, she said, her voice still carrying that echo of ancient power. All of you. They stood slowly, uncertain. This wasn't how vampire politics usually worked. There should have been more violence, more posturing, more bloodshed before a new ruler was acknowledged. But Arya had rewritten the rules in a single night. Kasha stepped forward, her expression unreadable. You've made your point, heiress. You have power.
Authority.
The blood of queens, she tilted her head. But power without knowledge is dangerous. You've been awake to your heritage for days. Most of us have lived for centuries. You'll need advisors. Allies. Are you offering? Arya asked dryly. I'm offering reality. You can declare yourself queen all you want, but can you negotiate trade agreements between territories? Settle blood feuds that have lasted generations? Navigate the politics of vampire clans who remember your ancestor as both savior and tyrant. Kasha's smile was sharp. You need us as much as we need you. Arya hated that she was right. Then here are my terms, Arya said, projecting confidence she didn't feel. I take the throne, but I'm not doing it your way. Not hiding in shadows, playing games, pretending humans don't exist. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What are you proposing? Elder Morgana's voice was ice. Integration. Real integration. Vampires and humans working together, not one ruling the other. Arya looked around the cathedral. Serafina believed it was possible. That's why some of you killed her. But I'm going to finish what she started. Impossible, someone shouted from the back. Humans will never accept us. They already know we exist, Arya countered. That video from the restaurant has millions of views. The secret's out. We can either hide and be hunted, or we can come forward on our own terms. You'll start a war, Morgana said flatly. There's already a war. You've been fighting it among yourselves for 300 years, Arya's mark pulsed. I'm offering peace. A chance to rebuild what was broken. But if you'd rather keep killing each other over territory and pride, then I'll let you. And when you're all too weak to stop me, I'll unite what's left by force. The threat hung in the air. Kasha laughed, a genuine sound of surprise. You learn quickly. Very well, heiress. I'll support your claim. But I want a seat on your council. A voice in your new world. Agreed. But if you betray me, what happened to Varos will look merciful. Kasha's smile widened. Understood. One by one, the other faction leaders stepped forward. Some offered support. Others offered conditional loyalty. A few simply bowed and left, clearly intending to watch from a distance before committing. Through it all, Draven stood silent at the edge of the room. When the last of the vampires had either pledged or departed, Arya finally turned to him. You haven't said anything, she said quietly. Draven looked older somehow. More worn. What is there to say? You don't trust me. You shouldn't trust me. I kept things from you. Lied by omission. Took gold from your enemy. But you didn't deliver me to Kasha.
No.
I didn't, he met her eyes. When I first agreed to find you, it was just a job. Kasha promised me a position, resources, a purpose after centuries of sleep. I told myself it didn't matter what happened to you. You were just a blood heir. A key to power. Arya's chest tightened. But then I met you, Draven continued. And you were terrified and brave and so painfully human, even with all that power inside you. You reminded me why I served Serafina. Not because she was powerful. Because she was good, his voice roughened. I should have told you about Kasha immediately. Should have confessed everything. I was afraid you'd run and I wanted to keep you safe. Even if you never knew the truth. That was your choice to make, not mine, Arya said. I know. And I'll regret it until my last breath. Draven knelt, formally this time. I offer you what I offered Serafina 300 years ago. My sword. My loyalty. My life. Not as a king. Not as an equal. As your sworn guardian, if you'll have me. The cathedral was silent. Everyone was watching. Arya looked down at him. This ancient vampire who'd crossed centuries to find her, who'd lied to her but also saved her, who'd trained her and protected her and shown her glimpses of who she could become. I don't forgive you, she said finally. Draven's expression didn't change. I understand. But I need people who know this world. Who can teach me what I don't know. Arya took a breath. You can stay. As my guardian. But the first time you lied to me again, the first time you put anyone's interests above the truth, I'll exile you like I did Varos. Are we clear? Draven's eyes shone with something that might have been relief. Or gratitude. Or both. Crystal clear, my queen. Don't call me that. Not yet. Arya offered her hand. Call me Arya. Just Arya. He took her hand, stood, and for the first time since she'd overheard him in the forest, Arya felt like maybe things could be okay. Not perfect, not simple, but okay. So, she said, turning to face the few remaining vampires. I need a capital. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere both vampires and humans can access. Kasha smiled. I have some suggestions. I'm sure you do. Arya couldn't help but smile back. Let's hear them. As they began to plan, Arya caught a glimpse of herself in a broken mirror on the wall. Her reflection glowed faintly with silver-blue light, the mark on her wrist visible even from a distance. She looked like a queen. She looked like herself. Maybe she thought those two things didn't have to be different. Outside the cathedral, dawn was breaking. A new day. A new beginning. 6 months later, the new capital rose from what had once been a forgotten industrial district on the border between the city's old quarter and its modern sprawl. Neutral ground, as Arya had demanded. Neither vampire territory nor human suburb, but something in between. They called it convergence. Arya stood on the balcony of the council building, a restored warehouse with steel beams and glass walls, and watched the sun set over her city. Her city. The thought still felt surreal. Below, humans and vampires moved through the streets together. Carefully, cautiously, but together. There was a cafe on the corner that served coffee during the day and blood wine at night. A clinic where human doctors and vampire healers compared notes on medicine. A school where human children learned history from vampires who'd lived it, and vampire younglings learned modern technology from human teachers. It wasn't perfect. There were protests, incidents. Just last week, a human teenager had attacked a vampire with a wooden stake, screaming about monsters. And 3 days ago, a vampire had been caught feeding without consent. Both were in custody. Both would face trial under the new Unified Laws Areas Council had drafted. Progress was messy, but it was progress. You look tired, Draven said, stepping onto the balcony beside her. I am tired. Arya didn't look at him. Do you know how many meetings I had today? 12. 12 separate meetings about zoning regulations, blood bank logistics, and whether vampires should be allowed to hold public office. And your decision on that last one? Yes, but they have to disclose what they are. No more hiding, she rubbed her temples. I swear, if one more person asks me to solve a problem that they could solve themselves if they just talk to each other, I'm going to scream. Draven chuckled. Welcome to leadership. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had settled into something unexpected. Not quite friendship, there was still too much history, too much broken trust for that. But partnership. He advised her, protected her, and perhaps most importantly, told her when she was being idealistic to the point of stupidity. She'd needed that more than once. Kasha wants to expand vampire territories into the Western Province, Draven said. She submitted a formal proposal this morning. Of course she did, Arya sighed. What's her angle this time? Economic development. She claims vampire investment could revitalize the area, create jobs for humans. And also give her control of the mining rights, I'm sure. Naturally, Draven's tone was dry. She wouldn't be Kasha if she wasn't playing 3 angles at once. Schedule a meeting for next week. I want to hear her out, but I also want the human representatives from that province present. Arya finally looked at him. How are the border patrols? Quiet. We've had no incidents with rogue vampires in 3 weeks. And the old guard? Draven's expression darkened. Morgana still refuses to acknowledge your rule. She's holed up in her mountain fortress, with about 24 loyalists. They're not actively causing trouble, but they're not cooperating either. Let her sulk. As long as she's not hurting anyone, she can think whatever she wants about my bloodline. Arya turned back to the city. What about Varos? Any sightings?
None.
The exile mark burns anyone who tries to help him. He's alone. Powerless, Draven paused. Some say he's gone mad. That he wanders the wilderness, talking to ghosts. Arya felt a twinge of something. Not quite pity, but not satisfaction either. He killed Seraphina. He hunted my family for centuries. He deserves what he got. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Do you ever wonder if she's proud? Arya asked softly. Seraphina. If she's watching somehow, if she thinks I'm doing it right, I think she's proud you're doing it your way. Draven smiled slightly. She always valued independence. Original thinking. You have both in abundance. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maria, yes, Maria from the restaurant, poked her head in. She'd found Arya 2 months ago, apologizing for not standing up to Dalton, asking if there was anything she could do to help. Now she was Arya's assistant, helping her navigate the impossible task of building a government from scratch. Your Majesty, the evening council session starts in 10 minutes, Maria said. I told you to stop calling me that, Arya replied, but she was smiling. And I told you I'd stop when you started acting less like a queen and more like a former coworker, Maria grinned. So probably never. Arya laughed and followed her inside. Draven came too, taking his customary position at her right hand. The council chamber was filling up, vampires and humans alike, taking their seats around the massive circular table Arya had commissioned. No head of the table. No hierarchy in the seating. Everyone equal. In theory, anyway. As Arya sat down, her wrist tingled. The mark was still there, faint but permanent. A reminder of where she'd come from, what she'd survived, what she'd become. Kasha caught her eye from across the table and raised her glass in a mock toast. Arya rolled her eyes but smiled. The meeting began. Across the city, in a bar that catered to night shift workers and vampires alike, a news broadcast played on the television. 6 months since the Convergence Accord, and while tensions remain high, officials report a 60% decrease in vampire-related violence. Queen Arya's radical approach to integration continues to divide opinion, but even critics admit the results have been. The bartender changed the channel. Nobody wants politics at this hour, he muttered. At the end of the bar, nursing a whiskey that wouldn't affect him, sat a man with haunted eyes and a fake ID that said his name was David Morrison. But his real name was Dalton. He'd been living in this city for 3 months now, drawn back despite his terror. He needed to know. Needed to see what the girl he'd thrown onto a table had become. A queen. An actual queen. He threw back his whiskey, paid his tab, and walked out into the night where humans and vampires passed each other on the street with wary nods. He'd never touch another person in anger. Never raise his voice to someone weaker than him. Never forget the night a waitress's wrist had started glowing and his entire world had shattered. Some lessons he'd learned came with a price. And some mistakes haunted you forever. In her apartment, nicer now, but still modest by royal standards, Arya kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto her couch. Tomorrow she'd meet with human civil rights groups. The day after, vampire clan representatives. The day after that, mediators for a dispute over feeding territory. But tonight, she was just Arya. A girl who'd survived the impossible and decided to change the world. Her wrist glowed faintly in the darkness, and for just a moment, she could have sworn she heard Seraphina's voice. Well done, my child. Well done. Arya smiled and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conflicts, new impossible situations to navigate. But she'd face them. Because that's what queens did. Even reluctant ones.